The galaxy had seen countless wars. Entire civilizations had risen among the stars, only to disappear into dust. Empires came. Empires fell. But one war refused to end. The human war. For 6 long years, the Galactic Dominion had tried everything. Orbital bombardments, planetary invasions, economic blockades, biological weapons, starvation campaigns. Nothing broke humanity. Every time an alien fleet destroyed one human world, another human fleet appeared somewhere else. Every time a city burned, another city kept fighting. The Dominion had expected fear. Instead, they found something far more dangerous. Determination. Now, after 6 years of endless bloodshed, the greatest peace summit in galactic history had finally arrived. Thousands of warships surrounded Unity Station. The station floated above a massive blue gas giant. Its silver towers stretched for miles. Millions of lights illuminated its surface like a second sun. Representatives from more than 400 alien civilizations filled the enormous assembly hall. Some were covered in crystal armor. Some floated inside anti-gravity spheres. Others stood over 12 feet tall. Each leader had arrived with an escort fleet. Each wanted to witness humanity's surrender. The massive windows behind the council chamber displayed a breathtaking sight. An ocean of battleships, destroyers, cruisers, carrier fleets. More than 12,000 military vessels filled space. It looked impossible to defeat. Many delegates smiled proudly. We've already won. The humans finally understand. They'll beg for mercy. They always fight too long. They'll sign today. Laughter echoed across the chamber. At the center sat Supreme Chancellor Varric. His dark silver robes shimmered beneath the chamber lights. His glowing blue eyes calmly watched every entrance. He had spent 20 years building the Dominion. Now he would become the leader who defeated humanity forever. A military officer stepped beside him. Supreme Chancellor. The human envoy has entered the station. The entire chamber became silent. Finally, the humans had arrived. Everyone expected something spectacular. Surely Earth would send its remaining admirals. Its surviving politicians. Its greatest generals. After all, this meeting would decide humanity's future. Large holographic screens activated across the chamber. Every eye turned toward the main docking bay. The enormous blast doors slowly opened. Everyone leaned forward. A single shuttle entered. Silence. No escort ships. No fighters. No transport fleet. Just one old shuttle. Its hull carried dozens of burn marks. Several armor plates were welded together using different metals. One engine emitted dark smoke before shutting down. Someone laughed. Is that really Earth? Another delegate chuckled. They couldn't even repair their shuttle. The laughter spread through the chamber. The shuttle docked. Its engines stopped. The airlock slowly opened. Heavy footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. Step. 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 The sound became louder. Every delegate stared toward the entrance. Finally, one man walked inside. No medals. No ceremonial uniform. No bodyguards. Just faded green combat fatigues. His boots were scratched. His left leg moved with a slight limp. Gray hair covered his head. A short beard hid part of his tired face. He carried an old canvas duffel bag over one shoulder. His expression never changed. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. He simply looked tired. The chamber remained completely silent. Thousands of alien leaders watched one exhausted human soldier walk alone through the largest political gathering in galactic history. The marble floor reflected every slow step. The sound echoed across the enormous hall. Step, step, step. Some delegates looked confused. Others looked insulted. One whispered, "Where is the rest of the delegation?" Another answered, "Perhaps they're coming behind him." But nobody came. Only the soldier. He reached the center platform. The podium was built for giant alien species. It stood almost chest high. The human calmly adjusted the microphone until it reached his face. Without asking permission, he placed his old canvas bag on the white marble. Clang! Something heavy rested inside. Metal. The sharp sound echoed through the chamber. Several military officers exchanged nervous glances. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly stood. His powerful voice filled the room. Human. Identify yourself. The soldier looked up. His voice was rough. Quiet. Almost emotionless. My name is Elias Ward. Former 1st Expeditionary Marine Corps. No rank. No title. Just a name. The Chancellor frowned. Where is Earth's president? Ward answered immediately. Dead. The chamber became silent again. The Prime Minister. Dead. The High Command. Most of them. The fleet admirals. Dead. Each answer landed like a hammer. No emotion. No hesitation. Just facts. The Chancellor folded his hands behind his back. So, Earth sends a single soldier. Ward looked around the massive chamber. His tired eyes moved across thousands of alien faces. Then he quietly answered. No. He shook his head once. Earth sent its last witness. Nobody understood what he meant. The Chancellor narrowed his glowing eyes. You stand before the entire galactic dominion. Our fleets surround this station. Your civilization has already lost. Ward looked through the giant window. Thousands of alien warships floated peacefully outside. For several seconds, he simply watched them. Then, a faint smile appeared. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't arrogance. It looked almost pity. He turned back toward the Chancellor. You brought every ship you own. He said softly. The room suddenly felt colder. Several admirals frowned. The Chancellor's expression hardened. What are you implying, human? Ward slowly rested one hand on the old canvas bag. His fingers tightened around the worn fabric. I'll explain. But first. He looked directly into the Chancellor's glowing eyes. I need everyone in this room to listen very carefully. The chamber fell into absolute silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Outside the massive windows, thousands of warships floated proudly above Unity Station. Inside, one tired human soldier prepared to say something that would change the fate of the entire galaxy forever. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The enormous council chamber was completely silent. Thousands of alien leaders stared at the lone human. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly lowered himself back onto his floating throne. His glowing blue eyes never left Elias Ward. Finally, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who believed victory was already his. So, Varric said calmly, this is what remains of humanity. He slowly spread his arms toward the crowded chamber. You once claimed Earth would never surrender. You promised to fight until the last breath. He looked directly at Ward. And here you are. Alone. The chamber exploded with laughter. Some delegates clapped. Others mocked the exhausted soldier. A single human. This is embarrassing. I expected warriors. They sent a survivor. One insect-like ambassador leaned forward. You should feel honored, human. Our Chancellor is willing to let your species survive. Another delegate laughed. You've already lost. Sign the treaty. Go home. Be grateful. The laughter grew louder. Ward remained completely still. His face showed nothing. No anger. No shame. No fear. He simply waited. Eventually, the laughter faded. Ward finally spoke. Finished. The room became quiet again. His voice wasn't loud. But somehow, everyone heard it. The Chancellor folded his hands. You were invited here to accept peace. Ward slowly shook his head. No. Varric raised an eyebrow. No. We weren't invited for peace. Ward answered. We were invited to surrender. A ripple moved through the chamber. Several military commanders exchanged uneasy looks. The Chancellor smiled again. Is there a difference? Ward looked toward the giant window. Thousands of Dominion warships glittered in the darkness. Yes. He answered quietly. Peace is something both sides choose. Surrender is something only the winner demands. The Chancellor's smile disappeared. You still don't understand your position. The Dominion controls every major trade route. We destroyed over 70% of your fleet. We burned your colonies. We isolated Earth. You have nothing left. Ward nodded. You're right. Another wave of laughter echoed through the chamber. The Chancellor leaned back confidently. So, you finally accept reality. Ward looked at him. No, I accept the numbers. The laughter stopped. The numbers say you destroyed our fleets. They say our cities burned. They say billions of humans died. He paused. And every one of those numbers is true. For the first time, the chamber felt uncomfortable. Ward slowly reached down and unzipped the old canvas bag. The sound of the zipper echoed through the hall. Several security guards immediately raised their weapons. Energy rifles locked onto the human. The Chancellor lifted one hand. Stand down. Ward reached inside the bag. Then, he placed a small metal object onto the white marble podium. Clink. It was a military identification tag. Another one. Clink. Then another. And another. Soon, metal tags covered part of the podium. Nobody understood. Ward continued. One handful after another. The pile became larger. The metallic sound echoed through the silent chamber like falling rain. Clink. 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 Thousands of dog tags. Each one carried a name. A number. A life. The laughter had completely disappeared. Ward gently rested one hand on the growing pile. These, he whispered, belonged to the 1st Orbital Defense Corps. They held the lunar shipyards. They fought for 18 days. There were 12,000 soldiers. He looked down. I buried the last one. Silence. He picked up another handful. These belonged to the children who lied about their age. Because they wanted to defend Earth. Another handful. These belonged to our medics. They never carried rifles. You bombed their hospitals anyway. The chamber became painfully quiet. No delegate moved. Ward emptied the rest of the bag. Thousands of metal tags poured across the marble floor. Some slid off the edges. Some scattered across the polished black stone beneath the podium. The sharp metallic echoes rolled through the massive chamber. It sounded like countless tiny funeral bells. Ward slowly looked around the room. You wanted to know where our leaders are. He pointed toward the sea of dog tags. They. You wanted our admirals. They. You wanted our generals. They. You wanted our heroes. They. Every sentence struck harder than the last. One elderly alien delegate quietly lowered his eyes. Another suddenly found the floor more interesting than the human standing before them. Even several Dominion officers looked uncomfortable. The Chancellor finally spoke. This changes nothing. Ward looked back at him. No. It changes everything. Varek's voice became colder. The Dominion still possesses the greatest military force in known space. Our fleets surround this station. Our victory is absolute. Ward slowly nodded. I've been watching them. The ships are impressive. He glanced through the massive window again. So many battleships. So many carriers. So many guns. He smiled faintly. You really brought everyone. The sentence made several admirals shift uneasily. The Chancellor narrowed his eyes. What exactly are you suggesting? Ward ignored the question. Instead, he looked toward the military commanders sitting closest to the front. Tell me something. When was the last time any of you visited your home world? No one answered. Ward continued. Months. A year. Longer. An elderly admiral finally replied. What business is that of yours? Ward nodded slowly. I thought so. The room grew even quieter. The Chancellor's confidence began to crack. He could feel something changing. He simply didn't know what. Ward placed both hands on the marble podium. His tired eyes slowly scanned every face in the chamber. I've listened to your speeches. I've heard your threats. I've seen your fleets. Then his voice became softer. But there's one thing none of you have asked. The Chancellor frowned. And what is that? Ward answered without hesitation. If humanity already lost, why did we agree to come here at all? The question hung in the air. No one had an answer. Ward leaned slightly closer to the microphone. Do you really think I'd walk into a room filled with 12,000 enemy warships? If I didn't already know something you don't. Across the chamber, several Dominion admirals instinctively reached for their tactical tablets. The first seeds of doubt had been planted. And once fear enters a commander's mind, it spreads faster than any weapon ever built. The chamber became restless. One by one, military officers activated holographic displays above their desks. Blue tactical maps filled the air. Fleet commanders whispered to each other. Security officers quietly left the room. Something had changed. Nobody laughed anymore. Supreme Chancellor Varric watched Elias Ward carefully. For the first time since the meeting began, he wasn't completely sure he was in control. What do you know, human? Ward didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the enormous chamber. So many faces. So many uniforms. So many decorations. His eyes stopped on an elderly Dominion admiral. Tell me something. How many wars have you fought? The admiral proudly lifted his head. 32 campaigns. And every one ended in victory. Ward nodded slowly. I believe you. The admiral smiled. But you've never fought humans before this war. The smile disappeared. Ward continued. You've fought pirates. Rebels. Border disputes. Quick invasions. But you've never fought a species that refuses to quit. Silence. Ward rested both hands on the marble podium. You studied our weapons. You studied our ships. You studied our economy. You even studied our history. He paused. But you never understood us. One young alien commander spoke up. And what exactly makes humans so special? Ward smiled faintly. Nothing. We bleed. We cry. We get scared. We lose. We die. We're not stronger than you. We're not smarter. We're certainly not richer. He looked around the chamber. The only difference is what happens after we lose. The room remained silent. Ward continued. When your armies lose, they retreat. When your governments fail, they negotiate. When your people suffer, they surrender. He looked directly at the Chancellor. When humans lose, we adapt. A holographic image suddenly appeared behind Ward. It showed Earth before the war. Blue oceans, green forests, peaceful cities, children laughing, families walking through parks. This, Ward said quietly, is what you attacked. The image changed. The beautiful cities disappeared. Towering buildings collapsed. Fire covered entire continents. Black smoke reached the atmosphere. The room watched in silence. Another image appeared. Hospitals, destroyed. Schools, burned. Spaceports, reduced to ash. Then came another image. Human civilians digging through rubble. A mother carrying her injured son. Old men building barricades. Teenagers wearing oversized military uniforms. Ward's voice became heavier. You thought destroying our cities would destroy our spirit. You were wrong. The hologram changed again. Factories hidden inside mountains. Old mining tunnels becoming weapon factories. Civilian trucks converted into armored vehicles. Farmers building ammunition. Teachers learning battlefield medicine. Engineers working day and night. You destroyed our industries. So we built new ones underground. You bombed our military bases. So we stopped using military bases. You hunted our soldiers. So our civilians became soldiers. Several alien commanders looked disturbed. Ward continued. You fought our army. You never realized. The entire species became the army. A senior intelligence officer suddenly stood. This is propaganda. Ward looked at him calmly. No, it's survival. The officer clenched his fists. Our reports say your food production collapsed. Ward nodded. It did. Our oceans were poisoned. Our crops burned. Our livestock died. The officer smiled confidently. Then your people should have starved. Ward looked him straight in the eyes. We almost did. But almost isn't enough. The hologram changed once more. It now showed enormous underground cities. Hydroponic farms stretched for miles. Artificial rivers. Food laboratories. Thousands of civilians working together. Children carrying supplies. Doctors treating soldiers. Scientists building new engines. We learned to grow food without sunlight. We learned to recycle every drop of water. We learned to survive on almost nothing. He looked toward the military gallery. Every mistake you forced us to overcome became our greatest strength. The chamber grew quieter. An elderly scientist whispered to himself. Impossible. Ward heard him. No. Expensive. Painful. Slow. But not impossible. One Dominion general slammed his hand onto his desk. You still lost. Ward looked at him. Did we? The general pointed toward the giant window. 12,000 Dominion warships. Your fleets are gone. Your colonies are gone. Earth is barely alive. Ward nodded. You're right. The general smiled. Then Ward asked, where are your reserve fleets? The smile disappeared. The general hesitated. Ward continued. Where are your patrol groups? Your border defenses? Your planetary guards? No answer. Ward slowly turned toward the massive observation window. You brought everything here. 12,000 warships. The greatest military gathering in galactic history. He looked back at the chamber. You wanted humanity to see your strength. You wanted us to surrender without another battle. He paused. And for a while, it worked. Several admirals exchanged nervous looks. Ward lowered his voice. Until we noticed something. The Chancellor leaned forward. What? Ward smiled for the second time since entering the chamber. You left your front door unlocked. A chill swept through the assembly. One commander hurriedly checked his tactical display. Another opened an emergency communication channel. Messages flooded across hundreds of holographic screens. Nothing unusual appeared. Everything looked normal. Yet, no one felt comfortable anymore. The Chancellor stood. Enough riddles. Explain yourself. Ward looked directly at him. For 6 years. You believed humanity was trying to protect Earth. He slowly shook his head. You misunderstood our strategy. The room froze. We stopped defending Earth. 3 years ago. Silence. Complete silence. Every eye focused on the human soldier. The Chancellor's expression hardened. If you weren't defending Earth, then what exactly were your fleets doing? Ward slowly placed one finger on the marble podium. Then, he quietly answered. They were coming to visit you. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Far beyond the massive windows, the Dominion Armada still floated proudly around Unity Station. But for the first time, the commanders looking out at their glorious fleet no longer felt safe. Somewhere, far beyond their sight, something had already begun, and no one in that chamber knew how to stop it. The silence became unbearable. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered. The only sound inside the enormous chamber was the quiet hum of thousands of holographic displays. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly stood. His confident smile was gone. What did you mean? They're coming to visit us. Elias Ward looked at the Chancellor without blinking. You heard me. One Dominion admiral slammed his fist onto the table. Answer the question. Ward calmly nodded. I will. But first. He looked around the chamber. I have a question. His eyes settled on a young fleet commander. How many long-range scanners protect your home system? The commander answered proudly. Thousands. And slip space sensors. The best in the galaxy. And deep space detection arrays. They can detect a fleet weeks before arrival. Ward smiled. I know. The commander frowned. Then you also know. Nothing can enter our territory unnoticed. Ward nodded. Nothing large. The commander crossed his arms. What does that mean? Ward walked away from the podium for the first time. His slow footsteps echoed across the marble floor. It means you spent centuries preparing to stop massive invasions. Huge fleets. Carrier groups. Planet killers. He stopped walking. But humans stopped thinking like admirals. He turned toward the chamber. We started thinking like survivors. Several intelligence officers quietly exchanged worried looks. Ward continued. 3 years ago, Earth accepted one painful truth. We couldn't defeat your fleets. So we stopped trying. The room remained silent. We asked ourselves one question. If we can't win the war, how do we make sure no one else wins either? Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Ward pointed toward the giant observation window. You gathered 12,000 warships. You called it strength. We called it an opportunity. The Chancellor interrupted him. Enough games. Where is your fleet? Ward looked directly into his glowing blue eyes. Not here. Obviously. The Chancellor's patience was disappearing. Then where? Ward slowly reached into his jacket pocket. Several guards instantly raised their rifles. Energy beams locked onto his chest. Ward ignored them. He removed a folded piece of old paper. Not a data tablet. Not a hologram. Real paper. Yellowed at the edges. Covered with handwritten notes. The delegates looked confused. Ward carefully unfolded it. This is the final mission report. One scientist laughed nervously. A piece of paper. Ward nodded. It can't be hacked. It can't be erased. It can't be remotely destroyed. He placed it gently on the podium. 3 years ago, Earth launched something the Dominion never noticed. Not a grand fleet. Not an invasion force. Not even a battle group. Just small ships, old ships, mining vessels, cargo transports, broken patrol craft, anything that could still fly. Some delegates looked puzzled. Ward continued. They didn't activate slipspace drives. They didn't transmit signals. They barely used their engines. They simply drifted. One admiral frowned. That's impossible. It would take years. Ward looked at him. It did. The room became quiet again. They crossed empty space at sublight speed. Cold. Silent. Invisible. No energy signature. No engine trails. No communications. Nothing. The Chancellor slowly realized what Ward was saying. His face lost its color. No. Ward looked at him. Yes. They've been traveling for 3 years. Another admiral quickly stood. Our sensors would have detected them. Ward shook his head. You searched for fleets. We sent shadows. You searched for engines. We became debris. You searched for warships. We became junk. The room suddenly exploded with activity. Military officers began shouting. Hail the border stations. Run deep space scans. Wake every defense command. Priority alerts flooded every tactical display. Red warning symbols flashed across hundreds of holograms. Ward quietly watched the panic spread. Finally, the Chancellor shouted over the chaos. Silence. The room gradually became quiet again. Varric stared directly at Ward. Even if what you're saying is true, those ships would never reach our worlds. Ward tilted his head. They already have. Every delegate froze. One intelligence officer whispered, "No." Ward nodded. They arrived weeks ago. They've been waiting. The chamber felt colder. An elderly ambassador slowly sat back down. His hands were shaking. What are they waiting for? Ward answered softly, "For me." The Chancellor's voice became almost desperate. What kind of ships are they? Ward looked toward the stars outside. They aren't beautiful. They aren't fast. They aren't advanced. They're ugly. Covered in welded armor. Built from scrap. Old mining equipment. Civilian transports. Retired bombers. He paused. But every single one carries enough firepower to erase a capital city. The chamber erupted into terrified whispers. A Dominion admiral suddenly received an emergency transmission. His face turned pale. Supreme Chancellor. They're reporting unusual objects near Valerian Prime. Another officer looked up. Krell Command is requesting immediate confirmation. A third commander stood. The Zyrex defense grid has lost contact with 2 outer monitoring stations. Nobody knew if the reports were connected, but nobody wanted to take the chance. Ward slowly folded his hands behind his back. I told you earlier. You misunderstood humanity. We knew we couldn't outgun you. So, we changed the rules. The Chancellor clenched his fists. You would destroy billions of innocent civilians. Ward looked at him for several seconds, then quietly asked, "Did you ask that question before bombing ours?" The Chancellor had no answer. The room fell silent once again. Ward stepped back toward the podium. His tired voice echoed across the chamber. You called us weak. You called us defeated. You thought we'd spend our last years protecting ruins. He slowly shook his head. No. We spent them making sure that if humanity disappeared, the Dominion would disappear with us. Outside, 12,000 Dominion warships still surrounded Unity Station. They looked powerful, untouchable, invincible. But inside the council chamber, for the first time in 6 years, the most powerful leaders in the galaxy felt something they had never expected to feel. Fear. Real fear. And Ward hadn't even revealed the most terrifying part of the plan. The Grand Assembly was no longer a place of pride. It had become a room filled with fear. Every tactical screen flashed red. Emergency alerts echoed across the chamber. Military officers shouted into communication devices. Fleet commanders demanded answers. Nobody could find the invisible human ships. Supreme Chancellor Varric slammed both hands onto his command console. Enough! His voice thundered across the hall. Instantly, the chamber fell silent. Varric stared at Elias Ward. If this is a bluff, it is the greatest bluff in history. Ward answered quietly. You're free to believe that. The Chancellor narrowed his glowing eyes. You expect me to surrender because of a story? Ward slowly shook his head. No, I expect you to verify it. The Chancellor immediately turned toward the intelligence director. Report. The gray-skinned officer swallowed hard. Our deep space scanners have located multiple unidentified objects. He enlarged a holographic map. Tiny red dots appeared around several Dominion home systems. They have almost no energy signature. They appear to be drifting. The room became deadly quiet. Another officer interrupted. We're receiving reports from Valerian Prime. The hologram changed. A blurry telescope image appeared. At first, it looked like empty space. Then, Someone adjusted the contrast. A dark silhouette slowly appeared. It was enormous. Its surface was covered with rough steel plates. Parts of the hull looked welded together by hand. There were no lights, no markings, no active shields. It looked more like abandoned space junk than a warship. Several delegates laughed nervously. That's the human weapon. It looks broken. Ward smiled. So did Earth. The laughter died immediately. The intelligence director zoomed closer. Large cylindrical objects were attached beneath the vessel. Weapons. Massive ones. A Dominion scientist adjusted the image. I've never seen missiles this size. Another officer whispered. They aren't missiles. They are planetary bombardment devices. The room exploded with panic. Military commanders shouted over each other. Destroy it. Launch interceptor squadrons. Fire orbital defense batteries. Ward quietly folded his arms. You can. Everyone looked toward him. You can destroy every one of those ships. The Chancellor frowned. Then why shouldn't we? Ward answered without emotion. Because they were built for only one purpose. They don't return home. They don't retreat. They don't surrender. They finish the mission. The intelligence director suddenly interrupted. We're detecting unusual wiring across the entire hull. The hologram zoomed in. Thick cables ran across the ship's exterior. Nothing looked modern. Nothing looked elegant. Everything looked crude, primitive, dangerous. One engineer whispered, "What kind of system is this?" Ward answered, "A system your computers can't hack." The engineer frowned. "There aren't any digital controls." Ward nodded. "Exactly." Several scientists looked confused. Ward continued, "When every advanced system can be hacked, the simplest machine becomes the safest." The Chancellor's breathing became heavier. What triggers the weapons? Ward looked directly into his eyes. "I'll tell you. But I don't think you'll like the answer." Nobody spoke. Ward slowly walked toward the giant observation window. Behind him, the holographic image of the mysterious ship continued rotating. It doesn't matter if you fire plasma. It doesn't matter if you use EMP weapons. It doesn't matter if you board it. You lose. One fleet admiral shouted. Nothing is impossible to disarm. Ward looked back. Normally, I'd agree. He paused. But these weren't designed by engineers. They were designed by soldiers. Silence. They asked one question. How do we make absolutely sure? The enemy cannot stop us. The room waited. Ward slowly closed his eyes. When the answer came, everyone wished it hadn't. The Chancellor felt a chill. What did you do? Ward opened his eyes. They removed every complicated system. No artificial intelligence. No remote controls. No wireless network. No central computer. No electronic locks. Another scientist stepped forward. Then what controls the weapons? Ward looked toward the image of the drifting ship. He answered in almost a whisper. A heartbeat. Nobody understood. A heartbeat. Ward nodded. The weapon stays inactive. As long as one heart keeps beating. Several officers stared in confusion. The Chancellor frowned. What human is inside those ships? Ward remained silent. One long second passed. Then another. Finally, he quietly answered. They volunteered. The room became still. They knew. They would never return. They knew. The mission had only one ending. One Dominion commander whispered. Suicide cruise. Ward slowly nodded. They accepted death. So humanity could survive. The Chancellor stared at him. You expect us to believe people would willingly sacrifice themselves? Ward looked around the room. You've never understood humans. We don't fight because we're fearless. We fight because someone we love is waiting at home. The words echoed through the chamber. Even the Dominion officers lowered their eyes. Ward took one slow breath. Every person inside those ships had already said goodbye. They left their families. They left their children. They left everything. So one day, human children could see another sunrise. No one spoke. The chamber felt heavier with every sentence. Suddenly, a shrill alarm echoed through the hall. An officer jumped to his feet. Emergency transmission. The entire room looked toward the main holographic display. A frightened planetary governor appeared. His voice shook violently. Supreme Chancellor. We have visual confirmation. There are 3 more unidentified human vessels above our northern continent. Another transmission interrupted. 4th Fleet Command reporting. 2 additional contacts above Krell Prime. Then another. And another. And another. Every few seconds, another Dominion world reported discovering a silent human ship. The fear inside the chamber became overwhelming. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly looked back at Elias Ward. For the first time, he no longer saw one tired soldier. He saw the man holding the fate of an entire civilization. Ward glanced at the large digital clock above the assembly hall. Then he quietly spoke. You've spent 6 years making humanity fear time. Now, it's your turn. The countdown had finally begun. The assembly hall was falling apart. Not physically, but emotionally. Military officers were shouting. Diplomats argued across the room. Emergency channels stayed open. Every few seconds, another Dominion world reported an unidentified human vessel in orbit. Some ships drifted above oceans. Others hid inside asteroid belts. A few had already positioned themselves behind moons. No one knew how many there really were. Supreme Chancellor Varric raised his hand. Silence. Slowly, the chamber grew quiet. He looked at Elias Ward. If your goal was revenge, you've succeeded. Ward shook his head. No, my goal was never revenge. The Chancellor frowned. Then what do you want? Ward answered immediately. An end. No one spoke. Not another ceasefire. Not another treaty that lasts 5 years. Not another promise. We want this war to end forever. An elderly diplomat slowly stood. You expect us to trust humans after this? Ward looked at him calmly. No, I expect you to fear another war. The diplomat sat back down. For the first time, he couldn't argue. Suddenly, a young communications officer rushed into the chamber. His face was completely pale. Supreme Chancellor. We've confirmed. His breathing became heavy. The unidentified human vessels have all become active. The room froze. What do you mean active? The officer swallowed. They've powered up. The massive holographic map changed. Hundreds, then thousands, of tiny red lights suddenly appeared across Dominion space. Gasps echoed through the chamber. One admiral whispered, "There are so many." Another officer spoke. "We counted 42 earlier. Now we're detecting over 400. The room erupted. 400. Impossible. Ward quietly corrected him. No, that's only the ones you found. Silence. The Chancellor slowly walked toward Ward. His voice was lower now. Almost human. How many? Ward looked at him. You really want the number? Yes. Ward took a deep breath. 1,112. The chamber exploded into panic. Several delegates actually stood up. One scientist nearly dropped his data tablet. 1,000. 100. Ward nodded. One ship. One target. No mistakes. The room suddenly felt much smaller. The intelligence director looked up from his scanner. Supreme Chancellor. We've identified the weapon system. Everyone looked toward him. They aren't carrying antimatter bombs. They aren't carrying fusion warheads. They are carrying. He stopped talking. What? The Chancellor demanded. The officer whispered. Relativistic kinetic rods. The scientists in the room went completely silent. One professor slowly removed his glasses. No. Another physicist quietly nodded. If accelerated, nothing survives. Even planetary shields wouldn't matter. The realization spread through the chamber like ice. Ward spoke softly. Humans learned something during this war. We couldn't match your technology. So we stopped competing. He pointed toward the hologram. We used physics instead. Another emergency transmission arrived. This time, the face on the screen belonged to a frightened planetary governor. Supreme Chancellor. We've established visual contact. The screen changed. A Dominion interceptor slowly approached one of the silent human ships. The pilot's voice echoed across the assembly. This is Dominion Patrol 7. Unknown vessel. Identify yourself. No response. The interceptor moved closer. The ship remained motionless. Repeat. Identify yourself. Nothing. The pilot slowly circled the vessel. Then, he suddenly froze. What? His breathing became rapid. Oh. Oh no. The camera zoomed toward a small observation window. Inside, a single human sat quietly. Gray hair. Old uniform. Hands resting on the control panel. He looked directly through the glass. Toward the interceptor. Then, he smiled. Not proudly. Not hatefully. Just peacefully. As if he had accepted his fate years ago. The transmission ended. Nobody inside the assembly hall spoke. Ward quietly said, "They've all been waiting." The Chancellor stared at the frozen image. "They're still alive." Ward nodded. "They volunteered. For 3 years. They've watched your worlds. They've celebrated your festivals. They've watched children play. They've watched families grow. And every single day, they hoped this meeting would succeed." The room became painfully quiet. "They don't want to fire. They never did." An elderly alien woman slowly stood. Tears filled her eyes. "My granddaughter lives on Valerian Prime." Ward looked at her. "I know." She stared back. "Would you really destroy innocent children?" Ward's face grew heavy. "No. I'd save them." Confused whispers spread through the hall. Ward continued. "That's why I'm here. If I fail, they already know what to do." The Chancellor's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Ward slowly reached into his jacket. This time, no guard moved. He removed a small metal communicator. Old. Scratched. Almost ancient. He gently placed it on the podium. The tiny device blinked once. Green. The chamber stared. Ward looked at it for several seconds. Then quietly said, "This transmitter sends one signal." The Chancellor whispered, "What signal?" Ward answered, "Stand down." Everyone released the breath they didn't realize they were holding. Then Ward added, "But only if I activate it." The relief disappeared instantly. The Chancellor looked horrified. "And if you don't?" Ward's eyes met his. "Then the silence tells them everything." Outside, beyond the enormous windows, the Dominion fleet still surrounded Unity Station. 12,000 warships. The strongest military force in the galaxy. Yet none of them could protect the billions of civilians waiting on distant worlds. Because the battle had never been about fleets. It had always been about time. Ward looked at the massive countdown clock above the chamber entrance. 2 hours 17 minutes and 43 seconds remaining. The delegates noticed it for the first time. The timer had not been there when the meeting began. Someone had activated it. No one knew who. Ward quietly broke the silence. "You have 2 hours to decide whether this war ends, or whether history ends with it." No one argued. No one laughed. No one threatened humanity anymore. For the first time in galactic history, the Dominion wasn't negotiating from a position of strength. It was negotiating. No one moved. The massive countdown clock glowed above the assembly hall. 2 hours 17 minutes and 42 seconds. 2 hours 17 minutes and 41 seconds. Every second echoed through the silent chamber. Supreme Chancellor Varric stared at Elias Ward. You've planned this. For 3 years. Ward nodded. No. For 6. The Chancellor frowned. 6. Ward looked through the enormous window toward the stars. The day your fleets entered our solar system. We already knew we couldn't beat you. A wave of whispers spread through the delegates. Ward continued. The first year. We fought with pride. The second. We fought with hope. The third. We fought because we had no choice. He paused. And after that. We stopped trying to win. The chamber grew still. We started trying. To make sure no one could ever conquer humanity again. A young Dominion officer suddenly stood. His voice trembled with anger. You call this peace? Ward looked at him calmly. No. I call this the cost of war. The officer pointed toward the hologram showing the hidden human ships. Thousands of innocent families are terrified because of you. Ward lowered his head. So were ours. Silence. When your fleets burned New London. My wife was inside. When your bombers destroyed the Mars shelters. My daughter was there. The room froze. The young officer slowly lowered his hand. Ward's voice remained steady. I searched for them for 6 days. I never found them. Even the Dominion guards looked away. An elderly ambassador quietly asked, You lost your family? Ward smiled sadly. So did almost everyone on Earth. The words struck harder than any threat. Ward looked around the chamber. You think I'm standing here because I hate you? He slowly shook his head. No. I'm standing here. Because I know exactly what hate creates. The lights dimmed. A holographic recording suddenly appeared behind him. The image showed Earth. Before the war. Children played beneath blue skies. Parents laughed. Crowded streets filled with music. Then, the recording changed. Explosions. Smoke. Collapsed buildings. Emergency sirens. People running through burning streets. The assembly hall watched in complete silence. Ward quietly narrated. These recordings came from ordinary phones. Security cameras. School computers. Nothing classified. They belonged to people who never expected war to reach their homes. The recording showed firefighters digging through rubble, doctors operating without electricity, teenagers carrying wounded soldiers, old women cooking for refugees. No heroes, no super soldiers, just ordinary people, trying to survive. Ward looked toward the Chancellor. You called humans primitive. You were right. We never built perfect cities. We never built perfect governments. But we built something else. The Chancellor remained silent. Ward placed one hand over his heart. We built families. And when you threatened those families, you created something stronger than any fleet. Another transmission interrupted the chamber. A frightened governor appeared again. Supreme Chancellor. The human vessel above our world has opened its exterior lights. The screen changed. The assembly watched live footage. The old human ship floated silently above the planet. Tiny lights slowly illuminated across its battered hull. Words became visible. Painted by hand. Not printed. Not engraved. Simply painted. For Earth. The chamber became silent. The governor whispered. Our citizens can read it from the ground. Ward closed his eyes for a brief moment. I know. The Chancellor looked back at him. Those volunteers. Did they know? Ward nodded. They knew everything. They signed the mission before boarding. They wrote goodbye letters. They recorded messages for their children. To survive, they accepted that they would never come home. An elderly scientist whispered, "How many volunteered?" Ward smiled faintly. "More than 1,000,000. The room gasped. "A million." Ward nodded. "We only needed 1,100 crews." But over 1,000,000 people stepped forward. The delegates stared in disbelief. Teachers, doctors, mechanics, farmers, police officers, retired soldiers. They all asked the same question. He paused. "How can I help save Earth?" One Dominion general slowly stood. His proud voice had disappeared. "If our worlds had suffered what yours did, perhaps we would have done the same." Ward looked at him. "That's the first honest thing anyone has said today." The countdown continued. 1 hour 58 minutes and 13 seconds. Less than 2 hours remained. Communications officers rushed from one terminal to another. Reports continued arriving. No human ship had fired. No crew had spoken. No demands had been made. They simply waited, as if every volunteer trusted one man, Elias Ward. The Chancellor finally asked the question everyone feared. "If I refuse, what happens?" Ward answered immediately. "I die." The Chancellor looked confused. "You?" Ward nodded. "I volunteered too." He slowly pulled back the collar of his old military jacket. Hidden beneath it was a small explosive device attached to his chest. The room froze. Gasps echoed across the chamber. The Dominion guards instinctively stepped backward. Ward calmly lowered his collar again. "If my heart stops, my transmitter stops. If my transmitter stops." Every volunteer assumes the negotiations failed. Silence. No one gives the order. No one needs to. They already know their mission. The Chancellor's face turned pale. "You've tied the fate of the galaxy to your own heartbeat." Ward nodded. "Yes." Outside, beyond the giant windows, the Dominion fleet remained motionless. Inside, no one could take their eyes off the tired old soldier. He wasn't protected by an army. He wasn't hiding behind weapons. He carried the weight of billions of lives, on a heartbeat that grew weaker with every passing minute. Ward looked once more at the countdown clock, then quietly said, "I didn't come here to threaten you. I came here to give both our peoples one last chance." The chamber remained silent, because deep inside, everyone now understood the truth. Humanity had not come to surrender. Humanity had come to end the war forever. The countdown continued. 1 hour 47 minutes and 59 seconds. 1 hour 47 minutes and 58 seconds. Every second echoed through the assembly hall like the sound of a ticking bomb. No one spoke. Even the Dominion guards had lowered their weapons. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly walked toward Elias Ward. For the first time, he no longer saw an enemy. He saw a man who had already accepted death. Varric spoke quietly. "If I agree to peace, will your ships leave?" Ward nodded. "Yes." "And the volunteers? They'll return home." The Chancellor frowned. "They've spent 3 years drifting through space. They'll need years to get back." Ward smiled sadly. "They already accepted that. They weren't promised a happy ending. They were promised a chance." One of the Dominion admirals suddenly stood. "This is madness." He pointed toward Ward. "We still have the largest fleet in history. We can destroy Earth before those ships react." Ward calmly looked at him. "You could." The admiral smiled. Ward continued. "But Earth no longer controls those ships." The smile disappeared. The admiral blinked. "What?" Ward folded his hands behind his back. "The moment they left our solar system, they became independent. No government. No military. No politicians. No commanders. They only follow one instruction. If peace fails, Finish the mission. The assembly hall became silent again. The intelligence director suddenly rushed forward. Supreme Chancellor. His hands were shaking. We've intercepted encrypted human recordings. The Chancellor looked up. Play them. The holographic screens changed. A tired human woman appeared. She wore an old engineering uniform. Her hair was completely gray. She smiled into the camera. If you're watching this, then I probably never came home. She laughed softly. Don't be sad. I volunteered. I wasn't forced. I chose this. The recording switched. A young father held a little girl in his arms. He kissed her forehead. Daddy has one last mission. I promised I'd protect you. And this is how. Another recording. An elderly doctor smiled. I've saved lives for 40 years. If giving mine saves billions more, that's enough. Another. A farmer. A teacher. A firefighter. A school bus driver. None of them looked like soldiers. They looked ordinary. The assembly watched dozens of farewell messages. Not one person cried. Not one begged to stay alive. Each one smiled. Each one believed. Their sacrifice mattered. The recordings ended. Complete silence. Even the Dominion officers wiped tears from their eyes. An elderly alien ambassador whispered, "I've never seen courage like this." Ward quietly answered, "Neither had we." The Chancellor slowly looked at the human. "You inspired them." Ward shook his head. "No, they inspired me. I wanted to quit. Many times. But every volunteer reminded me why I couldn't." The countdown reached 1 hour 33 minutes and 14 seconds. Suddenly, a loud alarm echoed through the station. Every tactical display turned crimson. The intelligence director looked horrified. "We've lost contact with 12 surveillance stations." Another officer shouted, "Human vessels are changing position." The holographic map updated. Hundreds of red markers slowly moved. Not quickly. Not aggressively. Just enough to remind everyone. They were still there. Waiting. Watching. Ready. One frightened governor appeared on the main screen. His voice trembled. "Supreme Chancellor. The human ship above our capital just transmitted its first message." The Chancellor's eyes widened. What did it say? The governor swallowed hard. It only transmitted 4 words. The chamber became silent. He slowly read the message. "Waiting for your answer. No threats. No countdown. No insults. Just waiting." The Chancellor looked back toward Ward. "What exactly do you want?" Ward reached into his jacket pocket. This time, he removed a folded document. Real paper, covered in handwritten notes. He placed it carefully on the podium. "This is humanity's final condition." The Chancellor slowly picked it up. There was only one sentence. He read it aloud. "No civilization will ever again invade another living world for conquest." The room became completely still. The Chancellor looked confused. "That's all?" Ward nodded. "No reparations. No revenge. No territory. No tribute. No prisoners. No humiliation. Only one promise." The delegates stared at him in disbelief. After 6 years of war, humanity wanted. The transmission ended. The room remained silent. The countdown reached 1 hour and 21 minutes. 1 hour, 21 minutes. Until the fate of 2 civilizations would be decided. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly looked around the assembly hall. Every delegate, every admiral, every scientist, every ambassador, they were all waiting for him. For the first time in his life, the most powerful leader in the galaxy understood something terrifying. Power could not force peace. Only wisdom could. He slowly turned back toward Elias Ward and quietly asked, "What happens if I sign?" Ward looked him in the eyes. Then, For the very first time since entering the chamber, he smiled with genuine hope. The assembly hall was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The countdown continued. 1 hour 20 minutes and 59 seconds. 1 hour 20 minutes and 58 seconds. Every second felt heavier than the last. Supreme Chancellor Varric slowly looked down at the single sheet of paper lying in his hands. One sentence. Only one. No civilization will ever again invade another living world for conquest. Nothing else. No revenge. No punishment. No demands for territory. Just peace. Real peace. Varric slowly raised his eyes toward Elias Ward. You could destroy us. Ward nodded. Yes. You could become the greatest empire in history. Again. Ward nodded. But then. He smiled sadly. We'd become exactly like you. The words echoed across the chamber. No one argued. Because no one could. The Chancellor slowly walked toward the enormous observation window. Beyond the glass, the Dominion fleet still surrounded Unity Station. 12,000 warships. The pride of the galaxy. 4 years. He believed they made him powerful. Today, he realized something. Power wasn't measured by how many ships you commanded. It was measured by the choices you made. When you had the ability to destroy your enemy. Behind him, Ward quietly spoke. When I was a little boy, my grandfather told me something. The chamber listened. He fought in one of Earth's old wars. I asked him, who won? Ward smiled faintly. He looked at me and said, the people who came home alive. Silence. I didn't understand him then. I do now. The Chancellor closed his eyes. He remembered the beginning of the war. His advisors had promised victory. His admirals had promised glory. His politicians had promised new worlds. Instead, the galaxy had received 6 years of death. Billions were gone. Entire planets had become graveyards. And for what? Pride. A young Dominion officer suddenly stepped forward. Supreme Chancellor. If we sign, we admit defeat. Varric slowly turned toward him. No, he quietly answered. We admit. We were wrong. The entire chamber froze. No chancellor had ever spoken those words before. The officer lowered his head. But history will remember this. Varric looked around the assembly. I hope it does. I hope every child in the future remembers that one day, someone finally chose peace. He turned toward Ward. The Dominion accepts humanity's condition. The chamber exploded. Some delegates stood in shock. Others argued. Several admirals protested loudly. You can't do this. We still have the fleet. We can still win. Varric's voice thundered through the chamber. Enough. Everyone fell silent. He looked directly at his military commanders. For 6 years. You promised victory. What have you given me? No one answered. Burned worlds. Broken families. Millions of graves. He slowly shook his head. No more. He picked up a ceremonial pen. Ancient. Forged from the first starship ever built by the Dominion. Without hesitation, he signed the treaty. His signature appeared across the paper. The moment the ink dried, every screen inside the assembly hall changed. A single message appeared. Galactic war status. Ended. Silence. Then, Ward reached toward the small metal transmitter resting on the podium. Every eye followed his hand. His finger hovered over the button. For just 1 second, the entire galaxy held its breath. Then, he pressed it. A tiny green light flashed. Nothing happened. The delegates looked confused. Ward smiled. They got the message. Millions of kilometers away, above hundreds of Dominion worlds, old human ships received one simple signal. Stand down. Inside each lonely vessel, a tired volunteer looked at the blinking light. Some laughed. Some cried. Some simply closed their eyes. One elderly woman whispered, We're going home. A former firefighter smiled toward a faded photograph of his wife. We made it. A young pilot looked through the stars. Dad. I kept my promise. Across the galaxy, more than 1,000 hidden human ships slowly turned away from their targets. Their engines came alive for the first time in 3 years. One by one, they began the long journey home. Back inside the assembly hall, Ward quietly picked up the empty canvas bag. The same old bag. The same worn boots. Nothing about him looked heroic. Yet everyone in the room stood. Not because anyone ordered them to. Because they wanted to. One by one, alien leaders rose from their seats. Then the admirals. Then the scientists. Then the guards. Thousands of beings from hundreds of civilizations stood in complete silence. Not for a conqueror. Not for a king. But for one exhausted human who had saved billions of lives. Without firing a single shot, Ward slowly started walking toward the exit. Step. 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 Just like when he had entered. Halfway to the door, the Chancellor called out, Elias. Ward stopped. Without turning around, he answered, Yes. Varek asked quietly, After everything we've done, can humanity ever forgive us? Ward remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he looked back. Forgiveness takes longer than war. But he smiled gently. Someone has to take the first step. The Chancellor slowly nodded. I hope one day our children meet as friends. Ward replied, I hope they never have to learn why we became enemies. Months later, the first volunteer ship returned to Earth. There were no grand military parades. No celebrations. Only families waiting. A little girl ran across the landing platform. Daddy. An old pilot dropped to his knees and hugged his daughter tighter than ever before. Across the planet, thousands of families welcomed home the volunteers who had sacrificed years of their lives for a future they might never have seen. Some ships never returned. Their crews had died from age, illness, or the harshness of deep space. On Earth, every volunteer's name was carved into a single black monument. At its center, only 6 words were written. They chose hope over hatred. 20 years later, children across the galaxy studied the Human Dominion War. Teachers no longer spoke about the largest fleet ever assembled, or the greatest battles. Instead, they taught one lesson, that the fate of billions had once rested in the hands of one tired soldier, carrying an old canvas bag, filled with memories instead of weapons. And when history gave humanity the chance for revenge, humanity chose something far more difficult. Peace. Because real strength isn't shown by the worlds you conquer. It's shown by the worlds you refuse to destroy.